The new Google Pixel 3 is in theory a well-balanced phone that provides just about everything the discerning Android user needs in a surprisingly small form factor, and it gets extra kudos for this in today's phablet-dominated world. However, despite the use of pure Android, Google style and blazing performance, I found it hard to fall in love with. The blame for this, well, some unambitious component choices and a marketing-driven price that's patently crazy. But don't let that put you off. There's a significant market for Android phones with no manufacturer skin, no bloat, no add-on services to push. Anyone who's used a Sony, Samsung, LG or Huawei stroke Honor phone in the last decade will recognise all of this. And there's a massive breath of fresh air factor with Google's first-party phones. You build up your software loadout almost from scratch with just the stuff you want, just the online services you choose. Now, without bundled software and services to help subsidise the phone, you'd expect to pay more for it, and you'd be right. In the UK, the Pixel 3 is a whopping £739, including VAT for this 64gig version, and £839 for the 128 variant. Given the ubiquity of a glass sandwich form factor, genuinely off-the-shelf components, including a Snapdragon 845 chipset and only 4GB of RAM, an AMOLED 1080p display without notch, and so on, competing handsets with similar basic specification are dramatically cheaper, making the real question, how much do you value having pure Android and how much do you value having high specs, including IP68 waterproofing here, in a compact form factor that's trivial to slip into the smallest pockets? If you're okay with a £200 premium, and that's a big if for these factors, then the Pixel 3 is indeed possibly your best option, with some nice surprises included, not least an astonishingly good camera setup. The Google Pixel hardware has been improving year on year, and the Pixel 3 nails it in most regards. The glass back is mostly frosted, stroke coated, making it much grippier to the extent that you could consider keeping the phone naked, i.e. uncased, since it's unlikely you drop it from your grip alone. The top section is the unadorned glass and is oleophobic, letting you appreciate that Google spec'd most of the back to be the high grip finish. Look at this. Very grippy. The front is also oleophobic, of course, nicely so for a very slick finger touch experience. The top and bottom bezels are significant by 2018 standards, but still a better look than for last year's Pixel 2. They match too, unlike on the larger Pixel 3 XL, of which more in the next show, hopefully. The top bezel contains a pair of chunky front cameras, also explaining the 3 XL's notch, by the way. Plus, there's enough bezel surrounding the top and bottom speaker grills that you'd believe that Google has indeed improved on last year's Pixel 2 speakers. 40% louder was the claim. However, and disappointingly for yours truly, last year's true stereo speaker pair, the 2 and 2XL here, has been ditched for an imbalanced tweeter in the left channel, i.e. the usual earpiece, and a full-size speaker down the bottom for the right channel, commonly referred to as faux stereo. The arrangement isn't terrible, but it's a downgrade from what we had in last year's Pixels, whatever Google might claim. And yes, there's a bit more bass and top end, but it's all unbalanced, plus the main speaker sounds overdriven and is prone to distortion. Here's a demo full volume. It really isn't hi-fi, it really isn't. I suspect it'll be fine for the spoken voice and podcast and sat-nav instructions, but here's the same piece on the 2XL, also full volume. I think that's definitely slightly quieter, but more natural and with higher fidelity and no distortion. It's a fine distinction, but you know me and phone speakers. Down the bottom is the solitary port, USB Type-C with power delivery compatibility up to 3 amps, as usual for Google, i.e. 15 watts, plus a single nano SIM pop-out tray. There's no audio jack, as with last year's Pixel, though Google makes up for this by including both Type-C headphones and a high-quality, low-latency DAC dongle in the box for anyone wanting to plug in legacy 3.5mm headphones, so they've kind of got it covered. But it's on the Pixel 3's back that the biggest unique selling point lies. The rear camera has just the one lens plus a somewhat mysterious spectral and flicker sensor, but the magic happens in software. The base camera is nigh on identical to that in the Pixel 2 series, so 12.2 megapixels f/1.8, 1/2.55 inch sensor and OIS with dual pixel focusing, so pretty high spec without being best in class. But as usual, it's Google's software that makes sure results are up with the best in the world. Up to 15 frames are now shot for every single photo, with the HDR+ software completely revamped here for the Pixel 3 range, combining all the exposures intelligently to minimize noise and maximize detail and dynamic range. And results are superb, as you can see here, right up with the iPhone XS range and the best of Samsung, even my beloved Lumia 950. Yes, they have a certain HDR, high contrast, sharpened character rather than an absolute purity, but they also usually have a certain wow about them. Think a Snapseed if you've used that on Google Android phones before. And that's what most people like. The Pixel 3 camera software does go further, emulating optical zoom, not with a high-resolution pure-view sensor or by using an extra telephoto lens, but by using natural hand wobble during those aforementioned 15 fast-taken photos to do sub-pixel rendering, allowing genuinely lossless zoom. And if you mount the Pixel 3 on a tripod so there's no wobble, the OIS mechanism is apparently wobbled artificially for you when zooming to make sure that enough pixel detail is gathered to do the zoom calculations. It's a clever idea that we have seen attempted in the past by the likes of Oppo, but implemented much better here, though note that zoomed photos aren't quite as good as those from a dedicated 2x or 3x telephoto lens, such as on the Mate 20 Pro or Galaxy S9 Plus, as you'd expect, but they're impressive for a single lens device. Plus, you get a top shot feature that, in theory, intelligently captures and saves multiple frames when shooting people, and presents the one in which eyes, smile, etc. are perfect. It didn't actually work for me, and yes, I had motion set to auto, but Google is still actively fiddling with the camera app on the Pixel 3, so updates should get this working reliably. Ditto night vision, which has yet to arrive as I record this, with Google again in theory taking loads of frames, combining and aligning them auto-magically to create night shots that look like they were taken in daylight. We've seen this from Huawei and OnePlus before and others, and I'm sure Google's version will be just as good when it arrives. Video capture is up to 4K and has the usual excellent Google software stabilization, though it's marred by loud hiss on the audio soundtrack. So this is a test of wide-angle video, looking at stabilization and the performance of that wide-angle lens in video mode with the Google Pixel 3 camera software. Now switching to the front lens, and again looking at stabilization. Normally pretty good with EIS with the Google software. I don't think the OIS is used in video mode. It should be pretty stable. It looks stable on the Pixel 3 screen. Now back to the front camera, and again to the wide angle front camera. It just makes so much difference. Rather than have to play spot the nose hair, all of a sudden you see something of what's around you. Wide angle video on the Pixel 3 camera. Pretty great, though it's not clear what causes the hiss. It's a fair bet that something can be done in a software update if Google cares enough to listen. The two front cameras provide regular and wide-angle selfies at f/1.8 and f/2.2 respectively, both decent-size optics, and with the regular front camera even having autofocus. Add in Google's excellent usual HDR+ software and selfies have never looked so good or been so flexible. In terms of OS and software, this is the easiest phone series to review in the world. You know exactly what you're getting already. Stock Android with all the latest Google applications and services, tying into each other for authentication and generally playing well. And with zero bloat and zero need to go through the interface, fiddling with things out of the box, turning stuff off, disabling and so on. True, you're paying for this in terms of the asking price for the Pixel 3 series, partly because there are no commercial deals behind the scenes. The high cost does also include 3 years of full resolution, full quality backups of your photos and videos, and that has to be worth something. Battery life is great. Android 9 is a huge step forwards in my view. I was able to get through a full day with consummate ease. Google's decision to equip the Pixel 3 with 4GB of RAM, as on the Pixel 2, has been a bit controversial, but it works on this smaller Pixel. With a 1080p display and perhaps a lighter computing workload, the Pixel 3 has been fine. I loaded up a dozen big applications and all were kept in RAM for 24 hours without anything being closed down. I watched the free RAM during all of this and it was right down to the wire at times, but that 4GB RAM was always enough. Of course, the QHD display and potentially higher workload on the Pixel 3 XL are a different story and apparently a problem, but that's for another review. For completeness, capacity in the battery is 2915 mAh. Charging is fast at 3 amps from the supplied power delivery charger, plus there are Qi top-ups through the day if you feel the need. A welcome return to wireless charging on the Google first-party phone series. Overall, there's a lot to recommend here, set in an imperfect Android world where security vulnerabilities, malware and other issues are weekly news events, where even major manufacturers have flawed update records. The pure Google monthly updates, only days behind the OS code itself being fixed, take some beating. And if you need further convincing, then take comfort from the fact that you're getting hardware and software combined, one of the best cameras on a smartphone today, certainly the one that gives best results with a minimum of user effort, plus you're also getting flagship specifications in almost every other regard: water and dust proofing, great display, Qi charging, and so on. Skeptics, well okay, me, will point to the lack of a 3.5mm audio jack or the imbalanced, overdriven speaker arrangement. But these can be overlooked if you want all Google all the time, and it's helping you day after day, month after month, with no carrier or other sponsor messages or spam to impede your Android experience.